Miguel Iterade off camera for the MMA Museum podcast. And we're here with another Midwest veteran, one of those guys that put in the miles, and another one of those guys that Sure Dog does not do them justice. Most of their fights at this point are not documented on Sure Dog. I think he's got 20 fights on Sure Dog, and he's probably upwards of 30 something. So I want to introduce to you Joel Blanton. There's Joel Blanton. How you doing, Joel?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
It's awesome to have you on, man. This guy was one of those old school guys. Now we're gonna try to paint the whole picture, tell the whole story here. And he started to fight way back in about 2002. So we're talking about maybe just coming aboard on the commission. I'm sure there are fights before that, but how'd you get to the fight game, Joel? What'd you do in school? Were you a troublemaker? Were you not a troublemaker? What's the deal?
I was actually a pretty good kid. I wrestled in high school, was standout wrestler my senior year. I didn't hit the shady spot till after high school. But I got into, I put down my skateboard, picked up a gym membership, got into powerlifting a little bit later than that, and was into pro wrestling, actually, a promotion based out of Indianapolis. It still runs to this day. This was in right around the year 2000.
Okay.
And they rented their ring out one night, and I was really good friends with and still am to this day, with the owner of the promotion's son. And he was like, "Hey, we don't have an event next week, but we have to set up the ring for these fights. You should see it. It's crazy." And little did I know it was for Integrated Fighting, which was based out of Indianapolis at the time, who at that time they had a whole host of killers that was under their banner at the time.
Yeah, let's just frame it. They had Jason Godsey, who is like literally a first generation guy, probably.
Actually the first guy out of Indiana, from what I understand, that went to the big show.
Yeah, and I mean, he did Pancrase, he did UFC back in the early days. Then you had Chris Lytle, who's probably the biggest star Integrated Fighting produced. And the mastermind behind it was a guy named Keith Palmer, who also had some boxing and some hands in his background, which really helped Chris out a lot. And I believe that they're still together in terms of business and friendship and stuff. So definitely old school guys, very loyal, very cool guys.
Yeah, definitely. I still talk to both on occasion. Jason was actually the first guy I talked to that night. I was like, "Hey, you got to do some specialized training for this." He was like, he laughed, and then he was like, "Yeah." So, and little did I know at the time. And I bumped in some months later. I bumped into a guy, and this, seeing the fights, it was amazing to me that you could do this and get away with it, and it was a thing. And bumped into a guy who had fought. I was bouncing at a local nightclub, and he wore his belt in to the club, And well, I mean, in 2001, it wasn't completely douchey like it would be now, especially for like a local amateur belt.
Okay, young man, testosterone. Okay, all right. I got
small town, it's a town of 18,000 people.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. By now you're bouncing. You haven't fought yet, but where are you size wise? Because if I remember correctly, you're like 5'5", but you spend time like at heavyweight. Are you buffed out to the gills at this point?
Yeah, I was still powerlifting at 5'5". I was 205 pounds.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was really thick. I actually came across some pictures of when I was they popped up on like my memories on Facebook, and it was from the wrestling days, and I was like, I cannot believe I was that big. I'm walking around at like 180 these days, so it was really different to see the size difference between what I was then now and what I was then and what I am now.
Yeah. Now I don't want to get too far off. Wait, now you started something. See, now I don't want you to get too far off the fight career, but does it seem like there were like unhealthy practices in the sport of powerlifting and things that, you should never have been a 205 pounder, really, if you knew more about nutrition and stuff like that? Does that make a difference to you, or
Oh,
do you look at it that
absolutely.
way?
Especially now. Yeah, it was big. The thing was, is, when I took my first fight, I was still at 205. I was a little bit better conditioned because I had been training, but my training regimen hadn't changed as far as lifting all that much. Um, and the gas tank wasn't that big because that's a lot of body for my height.
Yeah.
And I was trying to eat a little bit better, but at the time I was still stuck on being a mass monster, because at one point when I was lifting, I wanted to be like 280 so I could get into bodybuilding. Yeah, that would have been a lot.
Yeah.
Um
So all right, take us back to the bar and the guy with the belt.
so we talk a little bit, instantly as soon as I saw him, I talked to him. He gave me his phone number, and then the place where he was training at, and it wasn't that far from me. It was only like 35-40 minutes. And I about 3 weeks later, I gave him a call, said I'm ready to get going to check it out. And I just I showed up one night with him, and then I
Who
just
was
never
it? What was his name?
it was actually in Donnie Michael's. It was after class in a karate dojo.
Okay.
We had an MMA class, and there was, maybe 6 or 7 of us, and showed up one night, and then I just never stopped going. Um, Chad was part of the deal at the time.
That's
Of course,
Cage Rage
he was
promoter
involved
Chad
with Cage
Wagoner.
Rage.
Yeah.
So actually it was kind of I was the heavyweight champion for the wrestling promotion at the time. And then I found a place to train for MMA, because my logic behind it was, why should I lose if I'm in better shape, if I'm stronger, if I'm better, if I'm faster, if I have all these positives up against? Why should I lose to somebody? And I get that there's storyline applications within pro wrestling, but it just never sat with me good on the inside.
Mhm.
So, and that's what attracted me more to MMA and jiu-jitsu, is that if you beat me, then you got over on me. Either you got lucky or you were just that much better.
Okay.
So, and that sat with me a little bit better than I had to lose tonight because of such and such reason.
Okay.
And
Now going back to it now, the first official fight Sherdog has, and you can tell me if you had any before this, but was Lane McDaniel, April of 2002 at a Danger Zone. So tell me
that
about
was
that.
actually my second fight. There was a promotion that, again, Godsey was involved in, at a Knights of Columbus in Indianapolis. It was only a one-time show. Um, it was a square cage that every time somebody hit the cage, they had to reach up and make sure that it was staying together. They gave it support. you know, uh, but that was, I really liked that time because it wasn't it wasn't a specific thing. Okay, this guy is good at this, so this is what we need to watch out for. It was, you made sure you did as much as you could to prepare for whatever scenario the guy was going to throw at you, and you went in and you did your best. Uh, an athletic commission wasn't involved as it is now in every single promotion. So when I showed up, I had zero clue who I was fighting.
Okay. Yep.
And after about an hour, they found somebody, and the guy ended up being like 35 pounds heavier and already had like 12 or 13 fights. But we
Okay.
were like, we came down to fight. We've been training. We came to fight. We're gonna fight. And then the fight end up winning the fight from Mother's Milk in less than a minute. Uh, and it just took off from there. Uh, I After that, I think over the next 10 months, I was averaging a fight a month.
Okay. Okay, and that makes sense now. But so let me ask you here. So, I mean, the bottom line with this stuff is, pro wrestling, you do get like the rush of the crowd, the show, the feel, even if it's at a small level. How do you compare the buzzes to after the win in MMA?
Oh man, a win in MMA, there isn't a lot bigger high. Some people would argue that point, but it's a big thing, especially I never little background for that, little context. When I started, I never even knew the UFC was in existence. When I first started training, actually this month is a special month for me, November. It's been 22 years since I started training. I got my brown belt in November. I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu in November. It's been 8 years, as a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So November is a very special month for me. Winning, the only reason I ever wanted to fight is to challenge myself. I wanted to see, first, I wanted to see if I liked it. And then when I liked it, it was okay. What else? Let's do another one. Let's do another one. And I never had any aspirations or anything to go to the UFC. Never even had a thought about it until I actually fought in front of Joe Silva down in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Hold on,
Yeah,
don't get too far ahead of yourselves here.
no, it was about testing myself in a different way because, I was for a recreational power lifter in your standard gym. I was decently strong. Um, I could triple body weight squat. Um, at 200 pounds, I could squat a little over 6. Um, I did an official 520 deadlift, and I could bench over 400 pounds. So, and this was all raw gear. I mean, I had some knee wraps and a belt, but I was still at least decently strong. But it was a different kind of rush. Um, Walking, getting ready, to make an appointment to get into a fight is a completely different thing.
Yeah,
Because
very
it's
interesting.
it's on your mind, and you have the highs and lows throughout the camp. We didn't even have camp then. It was just we just showed up and trained and God and fought. The training was so Neanderthal at the time because hell, we didn't know any better. It was a small town, and we fought each other to learn how to fight. We
Hey,
I don't know how many possible fights I could have walked into already having a concussion
yeah,
because we were sparring hard, and we were teeing off on each other. And when we had boxing gloves and shin pads for when we did our stand-up work, but when we did groundwork, we did our MMA rounds with 4-ounce gloves.
yeah, and let me frame this a little bit here. So, this is by the time you fell in with Animal House, right? And that so
Yes.
you had
Yeah.
Chad, who's kind of a little bit smaller version of you, but was a powerful guy when he was young, and also brought a little bit of wrestling background, right?
Yes.
You had Daryl Bulldog Smith, who by all accounts was one of the toughest guys, like from that time. That you didn't have to ask him,
Man.
would fight anybody. It didn't matter. No, he was a no nonsense guy completely. Jay Massey was pretty good, for the early days. Jay grabbed some belts and things in those days. So you kind of fell in with good people. Then you had Chad there. I don't know. Is he an evil genius? How would you describe this guy? Because by the time you get to his promoting and stuff, but he's a big part, I think, of why you guys had a positive, like, we can take on the world kind of attitude, chat.
It was, yeah, it was a no holds. It was just go. Let's fucking do this. For lack of better words, I don't know where we're supposed to be at as far as our language on here. I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible, but um,
You can toss an F word around; it doesn't matter.
uh, you know, it was let's. There's nothing wrong with trying to make the impossible happen, and I
Yeah.
believe that's still part of me today, especially like we'll talk about a little bit later on when I was just concentrating, when I was just competing jiu-jitsu, coming up through the ranks. That not only is are the opportunities there, you should be ready for the opportunities and grab them when you have the chance, because luck isn't just luck. It's being prepared when an opportunity presents itself. So that's why we trained all the time. We had our harder days and we had our lighter days even then, but it was still, we were just basically always in camp. We just metered our days on our intensity level,
Okay.
and we took the opportunities. There, some people ask me if I regret taking some of the fights I did on short notice, and the answer is always absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Because you never know. You never ever know unless you try.
yeah. The fight, especially certain fights, may not materialize if you with a 3-month training camp at certain levels. So, yeah, I think you guys definitely, in terms of attitude, had a winning mentality the whole time. So, but you talked about getting started powerlifting. 200 pounds. You get your fights in like a Knights of Columbus. You said now all of a sudden the first official fight that shows up on Sherdog for you is Danger Zone, which is Dan Severn's show. And now this is a documented show because they did bunches of them and stuff. How did you wind up on the Danger Zone?
Through Chad. And again, it was funny how I ended up fighting Lane, because I wasn't supposed to fight Lane initially.
Okay.
There,
Yeah.
we showed up. We had a full 4-man bracket. The guy that I was supposed to have in the first round was last seen in the parking lot and then not seen again. The guy who won on the other side of the bracket after his fight said that he didn't know that it was a tournament and he wasn't prepared to fight 2 fights.
Gotcha.
So, Becky Levi was Dan's partner at the time. I have a lot of love for Dan, and a lot of love for Becky. Becky immediately gets on the case and starts scouring through the fighters. And and Lane, all respect, man, he won a fight pretty easily earlier in the evening and then decided to take the fight.
Yep,
And
that's the
then,
kind of thing that happened in the old days for sure. Even on
man, yeah, and it was okay.
yeah, even if what is like considered like a legit show for the time and stuff like this happened all the time. Stuff that just simply is illegal now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's no way you could do that now.
so so yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting experiences. Now, where was it? How was the show? Talk a little bit about the Danger Zone and who'd you see there? And
Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it was a bigger room, the venue was, but it was still smoky because you could still smoke inside in the venues. And it was earlier, so I didn't really know like a lot of the fighters that were around, even on the local scene at the time. Might have bumped into a few people that I knew, but the 2 key people that really stand out, even to this day, this many years later, is Dan and Becky, because of what they poured into the show, how they ran the show, and not just for respect of who they are and what they did in themselves in the fight game, but how professional they were and how much they gave a damn.
Okay, that's cool. Now, did you get belts? Because they gave out belts that are still out. Some of them are nice belts that, like stuff like that. Or did you get a medal or a trophy? Like
It
those are
was
the
a
old days.
trophy that I still have, man. It's one of my favorite things. I have two of them. I fought for Dan and Becky twice. Uh, and have two trophies. And the thing I liked about that, it was tournament style.
Yeah.
Um,
But for
which
a wrestler, that's bread and butter.
yeah, I'm used to like going multiple matches in a day, and then it's like, okay, where you come in, you already know you have the possibility of fighting twice in one night. Okay, we have four guys together, so in the brackets were hand drawn on a piece of paper and then taped on the wall.
All right.
And yeah, right. So it was, looking back, it was really cool. Just because you never knew and you just had to be prepared. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
especially during that time because you could get away with that stuff.
yeah.
The athletic commission hadn't quite dipped their heads in. I mean, it's a good thing that they're involved for fighter safety.
Yeah.
Um,
No, but you're
but
you're you're a metalhead, right?
yeah, absolutely.
This has to be something like literally some of those shows remind me of what it must have been like to see Black Sabbath in a bar or like some, you know what I mean? Because those,
or old school Anthrax or early Slayer.
yeah, well, I'm older than you, so I did actually see those bands in a bar. I actually, but we'll get to that in another conversation. But yeah, I think you're talking about like historic moments that are happening in front of very few people. Like, and those MMA shows, even the smaller ones. But yeah, and you mentioned it. Dan was the presence, and Dan, as a competitor with wrestling in his background, like yourself, you guys are going to speak the same language. You know what I mean? It's like you understand, and
Yes,
brackets. That's a word from the wrestling word, bracket. I mean, it's not, but you understand what I mean. It's like already you're accustomed to it and stuff like that. And
absolutely.
Becky
That
was like a high energy pro. Like she ran the show really.
Yeah, and the thing about Dan is he will remember your face. Um, I hadn't seen him for years, and I was at the Arnold Classic in Ohio, and I turned the corner, as we're making our way through the rows, and I come around the corner, and he's standing in a booth, and we make eye contact, and I see him smile. And
Yeah.
I walk up and he points at me and I go, Joel Blanton. He goes, yes. It was funny. It was years later and he still recognized me. We still had a great conversation. It was like we picked off as soon as he remembered exactly who I was. The conversation just took off like we had just talked the week before.
That's
So
so
that's the unique things I remember like about Dan and the show and everything surrounding Danger Zone. That and it was just
yeah.
like you said, it was like going to a concert in a bar.
Yeah, very chaotic, very you never knew what could
Definitely.
happen. Now, speaking of chaos, you go from Danger Zone, which, all the early shows had some chaos around it, but now you go to Chad, the shows that Chad we've been mentioning is Chad Wagner, that he ran under the Cage Rage banner, and these may be the most glorious chaos shows of all time. I mean, I can't think of anyone more capable of mayhem, especially him young and like, kind of with energy
He's
and
a
stuff like
chaos
that.
manager.
Yeah, it's crazy. So talk about fighting in Cage Rage first, because you did stuff like, I mean, eventually you fought Jay Massey, who was a teammate and stuff. So like a lot of that stuff going on. But talk about that first Cage Rage fight, which looks to be Josh Daly.
Um, that was for an amateur championship heavyweight. Um, I had seen footage of him. I knew he was a stand-up guy. He was a Taekwondo black belt. He was a very large Taekwondo black belt. Josh was 6'3", 250. Uh, I just knew, this was the actual first fight where we talked about strategy. Because I
Okay.
knew I didn't want him kicking me, for sure. And it was in a ring that the professional wrestling association I was with, he rented from them because he asked me if I knew anybody could get a ring. I'm like, yeah, I know just the perfect people. So we ended up doing afterwards, after I wasn't wrestling for them anymore, we went back and Chad was doing business with them. So funny how that worked out.
So wait. Let me get this straight, just so that people know. Chad, like a mastermind here. All right. Chad, the show's called Cage Rage.
It was yeah, and it was funny because it was a ring, because it was a really small venue. So there were two parts to the venue. One side was a strip club, and the other side was a bar, like a different kind of nightclub.
Yeah.
And it was in that part.
Yeah, the after fight doesn't, you don't have to go far, I guess.
No, you have to just change and freshen up, and that's it. Right there, you don't have to leave or anything.
Very funny, very funny. So but how did Chad, so talking about Chad, because the thing about Chad is he'll be positive. He'll be talking, you're gonna win this and stuff like that. Give me an idea of how he was as a promoter of getting you to do these fights.
He would always the first thing, the phone would ring, and it was always straight to business. He's like, hey, I got a fight for you. And even like later on, like when we get into it, we talk about Benji and Sean Shirk, it was always, I would see it was Chad would be calling, and it was either very casual, or the first thing he was going to say is, I got a fight for you.
Okay.
And that's how we always started off the business calls. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, well, I'm going to run a show. It's against this guy. We got some footage of him. He's a stand-up guy. And we just talked about it. And I was like, yeah, man, let's rock and roll. And, Chad could gas you up, man. If there was anybody that was a hype man, it was Chad.
Yeah.
But I was already feeling good. I was really starting to gain momentum at that time because I was 2-0. I was feeling good. My training was starting to shift just a little bit. As far as like the weights, I wasn't doing like big heavy singles anymore. I dropped down and started doing, it was, mind you, it was still heavy, but it was a little bit more volume than I was used to. So gas tank was a little bit better. And like I said a minute ago, this was the first fight that we actually talked about strategy and making sure that we ensured right out of the gate just to be careful about closing the distance and making sure that we got the takedown and not fighting this guy on his feet. Won the fight. Actually, he was a big guy. He had a good base. I still remember the fight. It took longer to take him down than it did to finish the fight once I got him on the ground.
Gotcha.
Because I knew if I put him on his back, he was going to be pretty out of water. And I was big, and I was big enough at the time, and with my wrestling and my base and learning how to control people from the top position, that I was confident I was going to be able to keep him there. And finished the fight with strikes and got my first belt, got my first amateur champ, my only amateur championship.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, so let's paint a picture here. So Indiana is kind of like a hotbed. There's a lot of fights going on, including our own hook and shoot down there.
Man,
but there were good fights all over the place, and the good fighters were starting to pop up everywhere. And you're in the gym called Animal House. So, and as you said, it's a bunch of sluggers, and you may have gone into fights concussed and stuff. Now, your next set of fights in Cage Rage is something called Cage Rage Lebanon. It looks like submission, rear naked choke, submission, rear naked choke. You're starting to add technique, and at some point, the name James Klingerman will come up here. Talk about how you started to get into, realizing that you needed more than just to be powerful and to be a slugger.
Like I said, our training was very primitive, but it was always, okay, here's this from this position, say rear naked choke, since you brought that up. and then we would we would work it 10 times, maybe 20, and then okay, gloves on, mouthpieces, time to do ground rounds. And that's kind of how it went for stand up and for, we didn't drill like we should have, like they do now. Because we always, like we always say, especially now, drilling makes you better, sparring makes you tougher. And it wasn't always. We were so into the sparring and just fighting each other on the ground that we didn't drill like we were supposed to. But we were slowly, moving it along. The Cage Rage tournament, that was actually for a number one contenders fight to fight Jay Massey, because
Okay.
Jay Massey was the light heavyweight champion for Cage Rage at the time. And this is, by the time, let's see, that would have been fight number 9 and 10. I fought a Hammer House guy. No, I fought a guy that I had met in Fort Wayne previously at Severn's show by the name of Dustin Pino.
Okay.
On an asterisk, real quick, on Dustin, he ended up being on like America's Most Wanted.
Okay.
He held some girl captive for like 3 days. It was like they had a nationwide APB for him. It was crazy. But I ended up fighting this guy before all this happened.
Okay.
And if I'd have known he was going to be that kind of guy, I probably would have punished him a little bit more before I choked him. Just out of posterity for the future events. So let's see. Yeah, I had him first round, rear naked choke. And then I had a Hammer House guy in the second round. It was first time I had met Big Wes, who is, as we all know, was a character, man, in MMA.
Was that Chris Cruitt? Chris Cruitt?
And yeah, finished that on the ground, and then that earned me my number one, or my title shot against Jay Massey.
Okay. And
so
now,
at this point, I hadn't met. I'm sorry.
I said you're on a roll, but
yeah,
go ahead.
At this point, I hadn't met James Klingerman yet. I had heard about Jay. I had a teammate, Jay Martin, who was, I promise you, even to this day, is one of the toughest people I've ever trained with.
Yeah.
Jay was just hard nosed, man. You couldn't, if you punch him, he punched you back harder. Just kind of one of those. He had gotten a decision victory over Massey. So we kind of game planned a little bit. But it's different when the door shuts. Everybody knows that. I actually I'm very big on respect within the sport. I never did any of the trash talking that gets clicks and gets views these days. It seems to be the popular thing. I wanted to be the purist. I showed up. I wanted to be professional. I showed up. I wanted to make weight, be respectful to my opponent, and then come out and put on a show. To me, that was my job. I did have an incident where I was unhappy because I had cut 20 pounds in a week, but that's a future story. And I went over to meet Jay. We did weigh-ins. It was the day of the fight. I went over. I wanted to introduce myself to Jay. I walked over, just shook his hand. I was like, "Hey, I'm Jay. I'm Joel Blanton. Thank you for the fight." And I forget what all was said. And he was so soft-spoken and so respectful. And in my head, I was like, I have to get away from him because he seems like a really genuine, nice guy. And I have to keep my game face on.
Yeah.
So I shook his hand. I kept it very short at that point because he seemed like a genuinely nice guy. And come to find out later, he is. And then it was It's a good fight, man. It was a lot of back and forth, scored a couple of takedowns. Um, I do remember at one point we were on the ground and I was in his guard. And I hope I don't ever forget this. I threw a right hand and I hit him square in the nose, and I popped him good, and all he did was go and make a face. And in my head, I was like, "Shit!" Now I made him mad, and the fight went on, and it was a good fight. You know, I was doing all the things right. He wanted to clinch me. I'm walking in with my hips up. And the one time he went to plumb bob me, I went to back out. And the one time I did the one thing wrong, he timed the knee perfectly and kneed me right in the face, and it put me on my butt. Um, Even at this moment, looking back at the footage, I really wasn't happy with the referee, because by all rights at that point, Jay should have been able to move forward and finish me off, right?
Mhm.
Classic finish to the fight, right? Guy gets kneed in the face, put on the back. The guy is allowed to swarm and come forward and finish the opponent off. And he should have been able to, but the referee stepped up and made him wait a second. And then as I was getting up very slowly, then the ref called the fight off.
Yeah.
So even in the event of a loss, I'm glad I can be able to have that for myself, to be able to say that he should have been able to finish the fight in a proper manner, because I feel like he stole a moment from Jay. Um,
That's
and I
fair.
had there had been issues with that referee later throughout his refereeing career. But took my first loss.
Now,
Had
Jay,
met James, that James, he was actually training with James at the
yes,
time, met James.
Klingerman.
Um,
Yep.
it's hard, especially when you were 10-0 and you just breeze through everybody um up until this point, and then take a loss like that. It's a hard thing mentally. It was for me to be able to fully recover, because then you start doubting yourself, and
Yeah.
wondering what you've been doing with your training. But we just kept going. It was like, okay, the dumbest thing, probably one of the dumbest things I did was the exact 1 week to the day, we went to Brad Kohler's show in Minnesota, and I fought Brian Ebersol.
Yeah. Now, and talk about another guy like Ebersol's a lifer. He's actually went to teach wrestling and became a matchmaker and lives in Australia. He got married to an
Yeah, him and
Australian
I
girl.
actually stay in contact.
That's cool. Yeah, no, he's an awesome guy. He fought on a couple of my shows, and and the guy who turned out that he actually has like 80 fights on Sure Dog. So imagine how many he doesn't have. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So yeah, Ebersol's a top notch guy. So now you gotta. He may be your first test, like an international level athlete here.
definitely. Brad actually had a really good show, man. He had some for the time, he had some real guys that were really good up and comers that ultimately fought in a big show. Uh, Probably the first one off the top of my head, Travis View.
Okay.
But at the time, Travis was like 280 pounds and just enormous.
Yeah.
Uh, I think he ended up fighting at light heavy in the big show. But like Kerry Shaw, Meat Truck was on the show. Um, Daryl was their 155 champion, I want to say it was.
Okay.
But yeah, it was pretty good with Brian at first. I got a takedown, a little bit of back and forth. He ended up getting back to his feet, dropped me at one point with a left hook, and then uh fight was over. I
Mhm.
was underneath the ropes, and he just finished it. So
Yeah, that was that
not
was
not smart taking, especially Brian, who, you know, you can't. I don't know if he's ever been seriously hurt from a punch. The guy's got a hell of a chin on him. Uh,
yeah. No, he's been bloodied, but and messed up that way, but not that I've seen
yeah,
him like out. And yeah, he's an amazing guy, and another guy that you might underestimate if he just walked into the room, t-shirt on and
exactly,
stuff like that.
exactly.
Now, according to the databases here, you took some time off, and you had the two losses in a row. Now you're 10-2. You're starting to figure out though that their levels to this game. Was this like the next 6 months? Was this about training, and is this where you started to visit Klingerman?
Um, I actually picked up. James came up and trained with us, and it was funny because he was only a purple belt at the time. And I was like, I'm gonna crush this little dude. And he submitted me over and over and over and over and over. And I was like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, no.
So I made it a point to seek him out and start visiting with him. This was actually in his first place. He had a small little spot in the back of a Taekwondo academy, on the far east side of Indianapolis. And we hit it off right away, and have that was in, geez, probably late 2002, early
Yeah.
2003, and we've been friends ever since. There was a lull, in that time frame at the Animal House. Some of the guys had left, uh, and for a short time, it was just Daryl and I training with each other,
Okay.
because I had a key to the place by then, and we would show up, and Daryl would show up,
Yeah.
and then that's when, by then I started my skill set started increasing, because when Daryl first showed up, man, he just beat the brakes off of me on the ground and on the feet, especially on the feet, because I was a wrestler. I had never trained on my feet before, but I knew how to take somebody down and put them on their back.
Hmm.
But he beat me up from the bottom too, so it really didn't matter. But
Yeah. That's why they
it
call him the
got to the point
Bulldog.
where, I would have my nights on the ground, and um he would have his nights on the ground, and I would have my nights on the feet, and he would have his nights on the feet. And finally I was like, hey man, dude, it's just been us, so, what, I mean, it's cool and all, but the only thing we're learning is how to beat each other up.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. So we made the decision then to be under James. I did what I could to make it down, and try to stay active, and and just do what we could.
Yep. No,
So
just to give some props to Klingerman, he was, there were, I think Scott Sullivan, the hook and shoot, like one of the early hook and shoot guys, may have been a blue belt, and he was bringing in Mario Roberto, who's now in the States and
yeah,
is no, he was bringing Mario Roberto in the '90s, to train him and stuff. So but Klingerman was maybe the earliest of the jiu-jitsu guys after that. And on top of
for
that,
sure.
you happen to also run into one of the best guys. You mentioned he tossed you around and stuff. He's still around now, but from the early days, he was known as like, okay, his jiu-jitsu is very legit. So props off to go to him, and that's a good thing. Now you're still being managed by Chad Wagner, and now we're going to talk about you meeting me and getting set up with a fight in Seattle, and this one is against a little bit of a world class level guy, or could have been, and it's a guy named Benji Raddick. What do you remember of this?
Monday before the fight, Monday before Saturday, Chad calls up and goes, "Hey, I got a fight for you." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "There's a trick though," and I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "It's this weekend." He goes, "It's against Benji Raddick." I can't even remember what the pay was, but he's like, "Well, we're gonna get taken care of once we go out there. Um, can you make it happen with work?" The weight class would be 180. It's a same day weigh in. Um, Made it happen. We got out there. We got out there on Thursday, like a Thursday afternoon. Um, Even to this day, it's one of the most beautiful areas that I've visited throughout the travels in the U.S.
Sure.
I couldn't believe how absolutely beautifully green everything was.
This is
Um,
north of in the Seattle area. I think you drive north about an hour to one of the Indian casinos, if I'm not mistaken.
yes.
Yeah,
So we do same day weigh-ins. Everything's good. Benji's, very professional. We shake hands and everything. And, we do the meet and greet and stuff like that. And, um, I told you originally that there's a story behind this because I remember after the fight, one guy saying that I was looking all cocky in the ring. But the truth was, I was scared to death at this point because they announced me and I go out and of course I get ready, I'm in my shorts and everything, and they introduce Benji and they go 3-time UFC vet. And I turn and look at Chad and I go, 3 times? And Chad looks at me and shrugs his shoulder and said, "Well, we're here now."
You don't want me to
Like,
cancel
holy
here.
shit, are you kidding me? So um a the fastest loss I ever had, of course, Benji at the time, you did not want to catch a square punch by Benji.
Yeah, no.
Probably still to this day, that's something you don't lose. And he's older too, so he's got man strength behind it. So you Benji being one of the hardest pound for pound punchers at the time. Um, we come. I remember almost everything that happened. Up until the point where just before he makes contact with my forehead. We come out, we touch gloves, circle. I actually got a jab off. So I'm like, okay, I can touch him. We back up, recircle, from what I remember, and then he does this little shuck like he's gonna shoot in and take me down. And of course, I go like this, which is exactly what he wanted me to do. So he backs up and then he does the shuck again. And as I'm starting to lean down, he's already coming over the top with a right hand, with an overhand right. What I don't remember, and I've seen it on footage, is as I lean forward, he hits me square between the eyes, just on the north side of my nose with an overhand right. I am leaning forward, Miguel, and it puts me completely backwards. And he comes over, and I think I swiped away the first 2 punches of the swarm. Punch 3 and 4 stiffened me up a little bit more and a little bit more. The referee dives and pushes him off of me and falls on me. I sweep the referee. By then, everybody's pouring into the ring, and I rear up to keep fighting. Of course, I don't remember any of this. Chad stops me. He's like, hey, the fight's over. And I guess look around. I was like, fuck.
How'd I
I
do?
remember starting to lean over. And then the next thing I remember is standing against the ropes with Chad. And all of this chaos had happened. Cause I remember I want to say Maurice Smith was there. Josh Barnett was in the audience because he was out west, I think, at AMC Pancration at the time.
That's who ran the show. That was Matt Hume ran the show.
Yeah, Matt Hume ran the show. So yeah, everybody poured in the ring. It was havoc. I'm kind of glad I don't remember any of it. uh, but but yeah, it's funny how all that had transpired in like 6 days. But what most people don't know is he had really concussed me. He'd really jarred up my sinuses when he hit me.
Yeah. You
And
had trouble getting on the plane, right?
no, I was great getting on the plane. It was when we got to altitude and the cabin pressure with a concussion. And it started out on this side. It felt like a toothache. Like 10 minutes later, it's in my temple. And in another 5 minutes, it was back through to the back crown of my head. And I thought my head was going to split apart. I had my face cradled and I was balled up and I was crying and I could not stop. It hurt so bad. And I was rocking in my chair. We had the flight was 3.5 hours and I spent 3 hours like that.
Oh.
Um, doctors, flight attendants. So we landed O'Hare. As soon as we landed, hey, I'm great. Awesome. Let's get to Indianapolis. So I get to my gate and I said, I want to check in. They said, oh, Mr. Blanton, it's great to see you. We're now informing you we cannot allow you to fly to Indianapolis. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, from
Like,
Chicago to Indianapolis by car, it's another couple
so
hours to reflect and think about things.
so this was, like when track phones first came out, you could pay for your minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fortunate for my then girlfriend having one because she had already left where we lived and started heading towards Indianapolis, which to the airport was about an hour and 45 minutes. So she had already left. So I had to call her. She had to turn around. She stopped and grabbed my sister. And then they drove all the way up to O'Hare to pick me up.
This is like another hour 45 the other direction.
Yeah. Actually, for Chicago, it's 3 hours to Chicago from that small town from
Okay.
Logansport.
Okay.
Just to get to Chicago, not to mention to get to O'Hare. So I was
Gotcha.
at the airport for a while. Yeah, reflecting.
Sorry about that. Well, I'll give you props because you were on the layoff. You come off the 2 losses. You said you'd improved your training. You were thinking about it. When you took this fight, your exact words were, "This is a good fight for me." Very positive.
No, it was just yeah, let's do this.
Well, I remember
Um,
you saying this is a good fight for me because you wanted a guy with a big name, and you because if you lost it, maybe it didn't matter that much, but you were looking for a big fight, and maybe it was Chad
yeah,
who said those words. This is a good fight for him, but no, this is a good fight for me. It was you in my head. So I think you
I don't know. I mean, it's possible I could have said that.
were,
Um,
but definitely you were not shy about taking. Like you may have thought about it or whatever, but I don't feel like as a promoter. Yeah, Chad helped a lot with that too. Was we had a good
oh,
talking
absolutely.
relationship. So, but you
Yeah,
you you took that fight on short notice for not a lot of money and against a good guy that you knew was a good guy, and you showed up and gave it your all, and you suffered for it. And I tried to make it up to you after.
dude, you guys. That's the thing, man. Is nobody was taking that fight.
Yeah, no.
Nobody.
I'm trying to remember who the original opponent might have been.
And I was like, yeah, you know what? What? Let's, like you said, the Animal House thing. Let's try.
Yeah.
Let's try. Why not?
No, for sure. Definitely much respect and my hat's off to you.
No,
Now,
thanks, man.
here another thing that comes up though that is interesting. Just a minute here. Let me get my bearings. Got lost in Sure Dog looking around here. There we go, Mr. Bland. All right. So Ebersol, Raddick is actually like a very different athlete than Ebersol and maybe had more topside, as they say there. Next up, you go to Massachusetts, which is another road trip. Now, there's only like 2 months between these fights. So that's not really incredibly I know that in
Smart.
Massachusetts, yeah. Well, not only that, but me as a promoter, I'm thinking, you know what it was too is I never saw the Raddick fight. Like at that point, I hadn't seen it. I
Ah,
knew what happened, but I hadn't seen it, and my bad for signing you. But
ah,
we got 2 months. You went to Dave Garcia in Massachusetts, and it was an all time classic, great show in my book.
that was one of the coolest venues that I ever got to fight in.
Yeah, yeah. It was a bar, just So we've talked about bar, but this was a particular bar. I think it's called the Avalon in its history.
Yeah.
So at some point, like the Grateful Dead played there, and
No way.
and you walk out of the bar, and you're looking at the Green Monster, the
Yep.
Fenway Wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
man.
so it's
Full
definitely
location.
something that was surreal, and there were great fights on that show.
Yeah, I remember because I didn't know who Dave was. And then it was same day weigh-ins again, 10-pound allowance. They called him first to come weigh in. He stood up and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Because Dave is 6'3". Like, man. And this is part of that, that whole realization, especially like seeing that again, as I started to drop from heavyweight and down into to light heavyweight to middleweight to welterweight, um, is that my thought was, okay, these guys are naturally bigger than me.
Yeah.
I'm fighting guys that are not just tough and talented, but they're naturally bigger. That's going to make it that much harder. So I have to start regulating that at some point.
Now, the other thing I think that maybe looking over the lineup, this was a show that had a feel good vibe too, because I'm looking at like Jay Thomas was there, Leo Sylvestre was there, Keith Wisniewski was there. So and everybody with cornerman stuff. There was a large Indiana contingent at this show.
Man, yeah, there's an Indiana presence there. Shelby was on the card.
Yeah,
May she
yep,
rest in power.
yeah. She was definitely on that card, and she scored a knockout, a 5 second knockout in that fight.
Yeah, she did. Jesus.
And Jorge Rivera against Solomon Hutcherson was the main event. Two UFC veterans.
On a
Dennis,
note, real quick, um, Rivera's cousins were probably the absolute funnest
yeah,
thing about the entire weekend
I agree. I agree.
because we went out afterwards with them and went and got pizza with them, and it was a riot.
Yeah. Most people at that point, I was young, and most people kind of knew Miguel. If he's running a show, usually parties and stuff like that. And and
Definitely.
and somebody in the Rivera contingent came up to me and gave me the heavy-handed handshake with chocolate covered mushroom balls. So yeah, so it was an interesting week. They were cool guys. I recently, you're going to be on the podcast here, number 20 something, I think it is. George Rivera's in the first 12 interviews I did, and another
Nice.
fascinating interview.
Way cool.
Similar to your experience with Benji, he fought Lee Murray in England.
Uh,
I mean, some amazing stories there and stuff like that. You gotta love the veterans. So, but a lot of people quit at this point, especially with the Dave Garcia fight. You were doing well. It gets stopped on a cut where, this is one of those cuts where it didn't really do you any damage. It's not like you were also like talking nonsense and stuff like that. You were in good shape.
Man.
So talk about that.
Uh, he threw a nice Dave, on top of his height, he had good wrestling and he had good hands. Um, he missed. I remember he missed the first right, and he reloaded it and came back and he clipped me. Um, I'm glad it was on the top side of the jaw. Um, but it clipped me and it dropped me. I hit my knees, but I went for the takedown right away, and then struggling with the takedown. I'm back up to my feet and I get him into the corner. Well, by then, it's a head wound. It's going to bleed like crazy anyway. And it just started pouring down. I want to say maybe it got restarted and I was able to close the distance again and getting back into the corner to try to keep him from hitting me because he was, I knew he wanted to keep me out because he was so long. But then I was covered in blood. They've had it all down the front of him. When I got to the hospital, of course they stopped the fight. 3 stitches on the inside, 9 more on the outside.
Ooh.
And they had to call in a plastic surgeon to do it because it was right on the line of the lip, and they didn't just want to have anybody do it. That way it looked good when it scarred over, at least decent. So
Face it, Joe. Any help you can get.
Yeah, you're right. Another scar on the face.
Yep.
It's what I look forward to.
Yeah, but this is the amazing thing. So now this was the fight, with Benji and with Ebersol, maybe you were in it a little bit over your head.
Definitely.
As a competitor, it's hard. You didn't think that at the time, but now you recognize those guys were a few notches above, and that's no disrespect. The Garcia fight, despite his difficulties, I thought that you were in, but now you're taking another loss, and still continue to come and not quit. Now, what was going through your mind at this point? Because a 4-fight losing streak for a guy who was 10-0. There had to be something going through your mind,
What I want to, it's funny because now at this point I don't remember all of them, but I know that there were some others in there.
Okay.
Like I said, I had 33 overall, and not that many show up on Sherdog or even on the underground.
But not to be disrespectful, but a guy like you, when you went to fight Radic, it's because you were like, okay, this is also my shot at the top. And now you get this effect like you're going to the smaller shows to win, but going to the bigger shows to lose. And that doesn't sit right with you because I know the kind of man you are.
Yeah, just it's a regroup. I want to say when I really started to like drop down in weight classes and try to get guys closer to who's realistically closer to my size and my true weight class. Chad told me he had a fight for me in Richmond, Virginia. The promotion was Excalibur Extreme Fighting Championships.
Okay.
They had a really good main event. It was Nate Quarry, and I forget who his opponent was. Indiana guy, fought on Danger Zone a couple of times. His name will pop in my head randomly here in another little while, but
not Jason Rigsby.
No, Todd Carney.
Oh, okay, there you go. Another dog.
Yeah.
I think he's from West Virginia, actually.
It was funny. The show was supposed to be at 170, and then the promoter calls me, says, "Hey," it was like the Tuesday before the fight.
Is that Rick McCoy, the promoter?
I can't remember. Maybe it was Chad that called. It's like, "Hey, can you make 165?"
Ooh.
I'm like, man, that's another 5 pounds.
Yeah.
I was like, I tell you what. He's like, can you get close? And I was like, I will get as absolutely close as I can. And then, I think I lived in my sauna suit at that point.
Yeah, man.
End up making it like I was even under. End up fighting Scotty the Body Johnson. I think it was his last name.
Okay. Yeah.
Former like top NPC bodybuilder. Yeah. So he walks around the corner and he's more yoked than I am. And I'm like, are you kidding me? But I watched him walk. Um, I knew I saw he had a limp on a slight limp on one side, so I wanted to concentrate. I wanted to definitely kick him in the legs, and and just expose the weakness. Actually, the fight was, from what I remember, I don't remember a whole lot of it, but it was going very well, and um, I was tired of being on my feet, so I was like, if I if I know if I teep him, he's gonna try to grab my leg and he's gonna want to take me down. And that happened exactly. He put me back into the corner. I wrapped his head for a guillotine. He brought me out. We landed on our I was on my back and my guard, and I swept him and then choked him with a guillotine from mount.
Nice.
While the bottom rope was in my throat, and I was trying to make sure that I wasn't getting choked by the rope at the same time. Um,
Sounds old school. It's not.
right. So that's actually, um, I want to say that's when I fought in front of Joe Silva.
Sure,
Um,
he's from Richmond.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, no, and that's a great win. The thing about Scotty the Body is, like you said, a bodybuilder, maybe not enough time training, but kind of a threat. And he was backed by Jamie Levine for a long time. Like he was on a
yes,
lot
he
of Jamie shows.
was.
Jamie just loved him. So
I forgot about that. Yeah, man, that's wow. That's going way back.
yeah, for sure. Now
Jesus.
you come back into the fold with me. You're 0-2, but I like you. I
He
like you.
shows up. He tries, man.
Yeah, no, and I remember Chad showing up with like a van full of fighters, guys, like to save the show kind of thing, with like 5 guys. Something happens to that van, your show's shot. You just lost 5 fights. So
Yes.
definitely, like the most no nonsense team that was out there. Like if the word was all you needed with these guys. So you get to go to Milwaukee and the Freestone Combat Challenge, where I was matchmaking for Strasser at this point.
Yeah. Oh, Dave's show, man.
That,
Great rule set.
yeah, this was basically the pride rules of head kicking and stuff were allowed, and
With elbows.
yeah, with elbows. So it was as much of an NHB show as there could have been after they banned the headbutts and things like that.
Yeah.
And crazy guys, I'll tell you a funny story. The first time I was at their rule meeting, O'Malley ran the show there, and he'll do or say anything in Faircloth. Those two were the two little ring, orchestrators. So they're in the
Yeah.
fighter meeting. They're in the fighter meeting, and they go, "All right, headbutts, you get one."
I am not surprised.
You know what I mean? Head kick to the balls, you get one.
You get
And
one.
I'm sitting there like, you guys are doing this to fucking make me laugh, aren't you? Very good guys, very good guys, man. So your fight went well there. Who do you remember it?
Uh,
This is Brian Gray.
yeah, actually, it was, I can't remember the kid's name. Um,
Brian Gray.
oh yeah. Yeah. I remember him now. Um, came in, came in, came in fast, came in hot to close the distance, and then just use my wrestling, take him down and control him for there. And I want to say it ended in a rear naked choke.
Yep,
Um,
that's how it ended for
earned
sure.
earned another shot to come back because Chad took Squire Hill up there for a fight, and this kid smoked Squire
Yeah,
and was running his mouth. So they put us together for a fight, and Chad told me that I was not allowed to submit him, that I had to beat him, I had to beat him to make him quit. So that's just kind of how the fight went. Man, he came across fast too to close the distance, and I knew he wanted to strike, but I just wasn't going to do that at this point. I just wanted to take him down and grind him out. Little bit of scrap to put him on his back, but once I did, nice ground and pound. Remember at one point he had turtled up, and as I was punching him, I turn and look at Faircloth, like, are you going to stop this or not? Because I had punched him so much without answer. And Ron was just kind of watching the fight. And as I was punching him, I would turn and look at Ron. And finally, it was like, okay, the fight's over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And may he rest in power too.
Yeah.
I was out at Nogi Worlds and my phone rings and I didn't recognize it. And it was Ron. Randomly called me.
Cool.
We talked for about 15 minutes. I told him where I was and what I was doing. He's like, please let me call you later. And I was like, yeah, man. So I gave him, give me till tonight. He called me back and we talked for an hour. And man, that guy came clean on a lot of stuff. And he made me cry a few times, man. And it was
Yeah.
weird that he had called me to do all that and to talk to, because I hadn't at that point hadn't talked to him in years.
Yeah,
You
no.
know,
At,
my
at the end, he was in a dark place. It's you're gonna make me cry now because I probably a month before he died, I got one of those hour and a half conversations with him,
man,
and it was like he would apologize to me for losing fights and stuff, and he was affected by addiction that to painkillers because he was a fighter and he
yeah,
take the painkillers to stop the pain and keep training and keep fighting. And that was kind of he really was that simple with that stuff. He just loved to do it. The
yeah,
fighting, I mean. And yeah, that was one of those things when I found out that he passed away that really hurt because I was just like, man, he was apologizing to me for like letting me down on at a show or something like that. And I was like, man, with the whole Bodog thing, I let you guys down, So what can I
and
tell you?
it was, Ron. God, he was one of those other guys where you could hit him in the head as hard as you could, and he would just punch you back harder. I don't
Yeah.
think you could hurt his head.
Yeah, Ron
Uh,
Ron was loved the fight. Loved the fight.
yes. Uh, but I think for the third trip, going back to
And I got to tell you this: the Squire Hill that you mentioned. So Squire comes up. He's a young kid. Probably shouldn't have been in the ring, but he wanted to give it.
no,
He wanted to give it a grab. Get I don't know whatever the payday was, $100 or whatever. And he jumps in there, and the guy that he fought was actually not Brian Gray. Brian was his teammate, but the guy he fought
yes,
was a big fit wrestler.
yep,
Also with no fights, but a big fit wrestler who trained with Strasser. So, like, the guy already had some formation. And he comes out and he hits Squire Hill once, dead.
yeah,
So I'm the promoter. I actually go into the ring, sort of worried. And they got Squire in the corner. And Squire's standing there. And, he's got both his hands up on the ropes and stuff. And he's just going, I'm all right. I'm all right. And the doctor's looking at him and they're looking at one of the doctor goes, how old are you, son? He goes, 6, 7, 8.
oh jeez,
Yeah, it was definitely one of those
hey,
moments like,
sure
oh,
you're okay.
yeah, let's get this guy some water at least or something, let's get him a ride to the hospital. So definitely a crazy story. But Brian Gray goes down as a win. And then the next time you fight another guy who at the time, now I think there's a trip to Florida.
Yep,
And you fight Artie Brito. That
man, Marty.
Yeah, Artie's another one of those guys that don't let the Sure Dog record fool you. He's probably got a lot more fights than that, and just one of those kind of not I don't mean this is disrespectful to either guy, but he's almost like a B class Ebersol, like a guy that just keeps coming, workmanlike,
Yes.
hard. Talk about this fight.
Um, and nothing to Arnie, man. Artie, probably the worst shape I've been in for a fight. Um, yeah, because I got some stuff I want to clarify for one person in particular that I'm just going to leave nameless. Who had to do with the show down in AFC. Um, and I hope he hears this and I hope he takes it to heart. I was supposed to have a different opponent for the fight. It was supposed to be a top team guy, and something happened to him, and already filled in on short notice.
Okay.
So my opponent changed, my pay changed, and when Chad called me for the fight, it was a week out from the fight and goes, "Hey, I got a guy for you. How much do you weigh?" And I go, 180. He goes, "Good. That's only 10 pounds." But what I didn't tell Chad is I was 190.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
180.
had 20 pounds. He's like, "Okay, we're going to go to Florida. This is your guy, da 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 da." And I get down there and everything is different. I had starved myself for a week to cut 20 pounds. And then nowadays it's 20 pounds in a week is a breeze. But at the time when we didn't have, the methods that we have nowadays, 20 pounds was hard at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was hungry, I was dehydrated, um, I was upset during weigh-ins, and that had ruined that me being upset had ruined a relationship with somebody that I previously that we both had done work with before.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't my intention, and man, I know I was off, and I hate that somebody saw me like that, because I always tried to maintain, no matter what level of show it was, and I always wanted to maintain a certain level of professionalism, and I just didn't have it that night. I had a night, man, and it just, you know,
Yeah.
uh, and that still, even to this day, man, years later, that still sits on me a little bit, that I acted out
No,
in the ways.
that's big of you to mention it. Not your best moment, and
Um,
that's okay. You actually won the fight too
yeah,
with Brito, and most of your fights that you win at this point, you're catching somebody, getting them beaten, getting them to play your game early, and they don't last long. Brito took you into the 4 minutes.
yeah, shoot in right away. Just working different submissions, different strikes. I'll say this, because like I talk about, where I was physically at the time. I felt like I had 50-pound bowling balls on the end of my arms trying to swing during that fight.
Mm.
Uh, I felt horrible during the entire fight. And I'm so glad it went the way it did. It put me back in the win column, and I knew Artie had been around, because Chad told me not to mess around with him,
Yeah.
and I got a decent win out of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you go on. You're back in Milwaukee for Aaron Jarvis.
That was,
That's the guy who ran over Squire Hill.
yes.
So they made you go through his teammate first.
Yeah. So that's the guy that popped Squire and made him think he was back in elementary
Yeah,
school.
that's him.
Um, it's kind of ragdolled him, man, and punched him until Faircloth stopped the fight.
Yeah, no, it was. I could see why they made you fight another guy and give this kid a chance, but he was too young, and they messed up. We messed up in the being fair part about giving him a teammate and a real guy. But Chad
Yeah.
did a good job of sticking his chest out for the for the Animal House team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so you got him in about a minute submission rear naked choke. No, I'm sorry, TKO punches. There you go.
Yeah,
So now
TKO punch.
now you come back and you fight a guy who I think later wound up in Bellator and in the UFC is Justin Weeman.
Yeah. I remember I I tried to truck through him, and Justin, you can't do that with. He was a veteran, he's tough. Um, and I gassed myself out trying to go. I just put my foot on the gas pedal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember leaning on Justin in the corner, and James was absolutely cornering me for this fight. And James, I had him clinched in a corner, and I looked down at James and James says, "No more punches." And I go, "Okay." I break away, open the distance up, and start throwing punches.
Okay.
And gas, man, Brian just or
Justin.
Justin throws a nice kind of uppercut kind of hook and catches me right on the button and boop, fight's over.
Now, how does it feel like when you see a guy like him like move on in the show? You feel good about it? Do you remember like because you probably saw him fight again in Bellator or and in the rest of his career? No, he became a moderately successful guy.
I knew he was tough because I had seen him on the card. I had seen him fight up at Dave's before because by then, um, not only had I fought for Dave a few times, we were making trips. I was making trips to help, with other guys to help corner and stuff like that. So, um, I knew who he was, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Uh, I just going back and looking back through my whole entire MMA career, um, my fighting, the way I approached fighting was not strategic. It wasn't overtly intelligent. It was, I hit the gas pedal and um, let's see what happens. And for that reason, every fight that I ever had never made it out of the first round.
Yeah.
If I didn't overwhelm you and finish you, I ran myself empty, and or you were just that much better, like Shirk or Benji, when or even Justin, you know, uh even had I been smarter, would the fight have been different? Sure, it would have been different, but would the outcome have been different? It's hard to speculate, years
Yeah.
later. So
Yeah.
um
No,
it
for
is what
sure.
it is. I wanted to put on a show. I wanted to make it exciting. Um,
No,
and
the
really
whole
the only time I ever thought about fighting in the UFC was when I fought in front of Joe down in Richmond, Virginia. But outside of that, it was never about um getting a nice record together. It was about the challenge and going out and as they say now, come back with your shield or on it.
yeah.
Um and man, that was just kind of how it was.
No, for sure. You embodied that, and I appreciate that. Uh, and now we're going to get into the latter half of your uh, life and career and stuff. When we're going to talk about the last MMA fight on my list here. It's not the last one you had. You kept going, but you were like back in the old days. Joe Silva would say, "You got to win one more, and I'll get you a contract."
Yeah.
So you were Sean Shark's opponent
That
right before he went into the UFC to fight.
was after he lost to Hughes.
Oh, is it? So I'm talking about a second time, I guess. What did I look at here? Hold on.
Yeah, he had lost to Hughes, and remember they cut him,
Okay,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
he wanted to go back, but they told him to take a fight.
Yeah, so this was actually, yes, you're absolutely right. He lost the Hughes, then didn't come back for a bit, and you were his second for his second coming kind of fight, the one that he had to
Yes.
win to go ahead and do that. And this is another one for you. 3 minutes. How'd this go? Because Sean could probably match you, energy for spurt.
Yeah, and then keep going.
Yeah.
I was actually in pretty good physical shape. This Chad called me a month out, which isn't near enough time to prepare, but we did absolutely everything we could to try to prepare for it. But what I wasn't prepared for was how fast he was. Um,
Yeah.
Fastest shot that has ever taken me down. Because I remember the fight, we did the meet and greet the night before. He was super respectful. We talked, even he was still taller than me, only by an inch, but even Sean was taller than me. But we come out, a little bit of back and forth, feigning and stuff like that. And I remember he kicked my leg. So I back out and circle around, and then he smokes it again in the same spot.
Yeah.
And immediately in my head, it was like, you mother. And I go to throw this big right hand, and he completely ducks. It was intentional. He ducks right underneath it. Not only did he shoot fast, he shot fast enough to where he went by my front leg, by my lead leg, and had my rear leg.
Oh my God.
But yeah, and then I looked down
Wow.
and tried to get away. Of course, I didn't. Passes my guard like he did everybody else's. Maybe tried to throw a couple elbows. I might have gotten a regard, and then he passed right away again. Um, I remember knowing he will slice you with those elbows. So I was trying to be wary. Slips into mount. Of course, I want to bail. I'm only a blue belt at this time. I knew not to turn my back, but I did anyway. Run. He just locks it in, rear naked choke, fights over, and then he goes back to the UFC. Ends up being the 155 champ. I think maybe fought at 70 once or twice, and then dropped to 55.
Yeah.
But eventually he came the champ. But I, it was good to have that because it wanted to make me be that good. It
Right.
wasn't just, I mean, everything he did was super crisp and super clean. And I was like, wow, that was amazing. Because I actually got to move a little bit. It wasn't just, he murked me on my feet really quick, and I never had a
Yeah.
chance to get anything off. After you gotta work a little bit in the mix with it. But everything was super clean, and it made me want to be better as a fighter and as a grappler.
And how's the experience of, later on, you probably watched him on pay-per-view.
Man, we watched his first fight back, and I had some friends over at the house, and Rogan is commentating, and Rogan says something about, I'm paraphrasing, but Rogan says something about, yeah, he wanted to come back, but they wanted him to take a fight, and it ended up being an easy fight. And I sat up on the couch. I was like, I was like, man, he just said that. I was like, yeah, it
Yeah.
might have been an easy fight, but Dick, you didn't, you did, you had to put it like that on, pay-per-view. But
Yeah.
it was a funny moment for me. I look back at it and I laugh about it. But
So, and then, no, I totally appreciate that. And that's something that, they talk about 6 degrees of separation. That's just nobody in that room or nobody anywhere near you can say that they share any experience, anything like that. I fought him. I actually was in the ring with him. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like it's just a select club for that very reason. It's like, and you hear him say that, and you get upset at that. I'm sure there were other guys who've never fought before that were, much louder than you in the room. You know what I mean?
definitely.
So for sure, I always ask about those moments. How's it feel when you fought, whoever X, or whatever you saw, and that's very interesting. You also mentioned something I found very interesting, which was that now that you are a black belt in jiu-jitsu for many years and stuff, you understand strategy more, and you've got a real concept of the development of a fight and things like that. And you kind of mentioned that in your MMA career that wasn't a factor. Now, as you started to compete in jiu-jitsu, did that become a factor for you? Talk about how that you transitioned into being very active as a jiu-jitsu player for a while.
So, of course, I fought. My very last fight was actually Dustin Neese.
Yeah.
I was the Coliseum Combat 145 champion. Um, Actually, sorry, little plug there. I was actually the first 2 division champ for Coliseum Combat.
It,
I had
yep.
a title at 155, then I had a title at 145. Um,
Wow.
uh,
So you got down to 145 after being a 205 pounder.
yes, yeah, my last 2 fights were at 145.
Now,
Yeah, I look like an anatomy chart, but it's funny, those guys are still, even now they're still 5'9", 5'10". Some of those guys are 6 foot tall
yeah.
at 145. It's like, man, seriously, bring it down just a little bit, because there's no
Yeah.
way I was making 35.
Yeah, no, I believe that. I believe that. But that's still a remarkable transition in discipline too. You know what I mean? Because once you've gotten used to the bodybuilding, weightlifting, and that sort of stuff, you know, I think that's such a rush for people that get off on it. That's hard to give up, right? And
Yeah.
now you do have to lose some of that bulk to get to 145. There's no doubt.
So yeah, so definitely a big transition. But even that being said, for my height, man, I was still a pretty big 45er. Uh,
Yeah.
but I won the title. Had a little time off. They brought me Nice, and this was after, I want to say it was after he was in the house for the Ultimate Fighter. Um, and I lost on a stoppage. He had cut me with a hook on my forehead. Um, I'll say this about the finish. I stumbled. I feinted a shot and went to back away, and I stumbled. Uh, Fell on my back. He came forward and swarmed me. I had never been punched that much and remembered it. But
Okay.
by that time, I had a head wound. There's blood everywhere on my head and on my shoulders and face. Um, and they stopped it. But
But you were
right
coherent.
after that, I wrote MMA off, and I put on my gi, and I buried myself in it, and I did nothing but gi training. That was in
2010.
2010, and January 2011, I got my purple belt. Um, Man, I was super excited to compete as a purple belt because the promotion number
Who gave you
one,
the belt? Who gave you the belt?
James Klingerman.
Okay. There we go.
Actually, when I went from white to blue, James was still under Mario, and Mario came down, and Mario still did testing. So we ran through the gauntlet of tests, and then rolling with Mario was surreal because I had stuff done to me that I didn't even know existed, and he did it with the greatest of ease.
Yeah. Well, he
The
was.
guy was, everybody knows who knows Mario knows how absolutely good he is.
I'll tell you. I know him okay in that I think he fought Travis Fulton and Jeremy Horn on the same weekend, and
Jeez.
and I was the matchmaker for that. It was a 30-minute grappling match with Horn on Friday and an MMA fight with Fulton on Saturday. And
Jeez.
he went 2-0, though Fulton, disagreed with the decision, blah blah blah. But he was a black belt back then. That's the other part of it is this was 97
Yeah.
that happened. And he was already a black belt. So, that's a very deep rooted tree that you're that you guys are getting the
Man.
information from. So talk about competing as a purple belt. I cut you off. Sorry, sir.
No, you're all right. I was super excited. Man, my first four, and it was the same old attitude. Man, my first tournament, 0-2 and out. Second tournament, 0-2 and out. Third tournament, same. Fourth tournament, hey, I won a match against
Cool.
Dan Swift, of all people, who
Okay.
was kind of blackballed in the jiu-jitsu community right now due to some personal decisions, but we won't go into that. But he was super solid, at
I'll
the
tell you
time.
this. I'll tell you this
And
about Dan Swift. Dan Swift is still fighting right now in like the backyard leagues, like bare knuckle backyard leagues, and
she's,
and doing well. And he's an older guy at this point. Dan
yeah,
Swift may legitimately have 1,000 fights in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? And I think somebody should write a book about Dan Swift. But anyway, so you beat Dan Swift for your first jiu-jitsu win.
yes, at purple belt.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and
Miguel Iturrate, the MMA Museum podcast, is back here with part two with Joel Blanton. Joel's phone crashed on us last night, and we are just getting to the juicy part of his jiu-jitsu career where, I know after MMA, there's usually like a down period where a lot of people experience, like missing the competition and stuff. And Joe sort of moved into the gi world wholeheartedly. And we left off with that his purple belt career started off kind of rocky in the competitions. His coach James Klingerman took him to a big competition in New York, and he turned around and won it, and that left him with a real high ranking in the world. Why don't you take it away from there, Joel?
So actually that was in 11, the first time I went. When I went back in 13, I had won my division again and then registered for the first time in open weight class. A little thing about that first open weight class, it was interesting because not only was it the first time, and the first round of the open, I had the smallest guy in the entire bracket, this little Brazilian cat. But he grabbed my wrist, and I was like, "There's no way I'm letting him keep a hold of me." I ended up finishing that one, but then in the finals of it, I had probably the biggest guy in the entire building. No matter what belt, yeah, I still have pictures of it. At 6'9", he was 290 pounds. He was
Wow.
absolutely enormous. It just,
Wow.
it just played strategy, hand fought him hard, made him make a mistake, and actually put him on his back with the inside single. So yeah, long live wrestling.
Nice. And to be honest with you, I think that's where like you were a heavyweight at one point, not 290, right? But you've
No,
dealt
no,
but in the wrestling world, if you had to wrestle, there were always guys bigger than you.
definitely. This was I believe it was at middleweight. So I would have had to been this was actually at Nogi. When I first started competing for the IBJJF, it was in Nogi only. Um, and in the Masters 3 weight age division. So that would have been like 41 to 45 year olds, purple belts.
Okay.
So yeah, shortly after that, a teammate of mine, Mick Williams, sent me a screenshot, of the points of that you collect for certain, like that was a major. So those are some really good points that you collect for. I mean, and based on where you land on the podium, it'll give you even more or less points. So not only did I win my division again, I won the open again, which put me in the rankings at third in the world for my age and rank. And my
Okay.
very first thought, picking up from there, my very first thought was, how do I be number one?
Okay.
Going back to, that Animal House mindset, what is possible? What am I going to do? How can I be number one? A teammate of mine I want to say he was a white belt at the time. We had talked about it. He was an older guy. We hit it off really quick. He's still one of my best friends to this day. He's a fellow black belt.
Awesome.
We talked about it. We sat down for some dinner one night, and he's like, "Hey, I want to buy a package of privates from you because I really didn't know how I was going to be able to make the trip to go to Nogi Worlds, and that was the solution to being number one. I needed to go, and I needed to go to Nogi Worlds. So we sat down, and he goes, "Here, I want to buy a package of privates from you." He sat down and wrote me $1,000 check and said, "Here, there's your check." And I was in my head, I was like, "Yeah, holy shit!" Then my trip was entirely paid for and then some. So I immediately booked it and registered and went right back to work. The momentum carried over. I had a really good tournament. I won my weight class, which gave me my first world championship at purple belt. And I, of course, immediately going off the momentum from winning in New York City at the Nogi Pans, I immediately registered for the Open and then won my first open weight world championship at purple belt.
Okay, now that's
Which
amazing.
yeah, even at Masters 3, I know there's a difference between the adult competitors and us older guys.
Mhm.
We don't have we don't recover like that. We don't have the stamina like that. We can't go like that like those guys do. Those guys are absolutely amazing. But us older dogs, we still got bite, we still got fight, man, and I think it's great.
I think too. The other thing to mention is that there's a good place for it because, like you mentioned too, talk about the difference in your mind going into your first MMA competitions compared to going into your first jiu-jitsu competitions.
MMA was a little different because I had never, I had gotten into fights, out and about as everybody said, I was a street fighter. Everybody's been in a fight. Well, a lot of people have been in a fight out on the streets that got into MMA, but it's so different when, like I was said earlier, or yesterday, that it's different when you make an appointment to go get into a fight. It changes everything because then it's on your mind and they're training. But I had wrestled in high school, so going out for even jiu-jitsu, even for like the majors, I had been going to the smaller shows from white belt all the way to purple belt before I went out to the Nogi Pans. And it was, as far as jiu-jitsu, really, it was, for me, it was just, it was a different venue. I knew the stakes there were high. But one thing I really talk about, especially like after this tournament, because I won my division and I won the Open and gave me my first 2 world championships, which actually put me at number 1 in the world in my division and Nogi, and number 1 overall Nogi in my weight and my age group for purple belt.
That's an
After
amazing
that,
accomplishment. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you. And after that, I was like, okay, I got my brown belt shortly after that, and I was like, okay, what's next? But at that time, I started getting this. Don't get me wrong, the training was good. My strength and conditioning was on point. I did, I was doing absolutely everything right because I'm a very process related guy. I put my goal out there and it's a nice shiny object, but it's off in the distance. Right now, I have to worry about what's directly in front of me. That's my training session today. And then, as long as I do that as best as I can every time going out, then the goal takes care of itself. But and on top of that, I talk about that's my real secret weapon. My real secret weapon is I absolutely believed, without a shadow of a doubt, that I could. Not that I know. I hear this. Oh, I know I'm going to go win this. Now because I don't believe in that. You don't know jack. You don't know you're going to go do this. You can say it, But there's something powerful when you believe it in your gut, and in your heart, that you can, that it's very possible.
That's
And that
amazing.
it was my unwavering belief that now you're going to have to deal with me because I have a lot of steam coming forward with me. I got a lot of momentum, and now I'm going to be a problem. Um, I think I didn't even compete in the IBJJF in the gi until I was a brown belt. Um,
Okay.
uh, it was a Chicago Open. I did well. First year at brown belt, I did 2 Chicago Opens. I think maybe another regional, but I did nogi pans. My first nogi pans at brown belt. Um, I went in and I won I won my division, and I won the Open again, which gave me my third major double gold in a row, and that put me, with the wins I had at the Chicago Open, that put me #1 at brown belt in my age division, um, in nogi, and I think I was like automatically like top 5 overall in nogi, and went to actually I did Masters Worlds for the first time. For those that don't know, that's all the guys 31 and over, uh, and it's a gi only tournament. I did that for the first time. I won one, two, three matches, maybe 2 or 3 matches, and then I dropped a match in a semifinal, um, and got third, which put me, I want to say maybe top 5 in the gi, in my first year at brown belt, in the world, and I was still, because I had won Nogi Pans. I also went back to Nogi Worlds and won my division and the Open again, which gave me my fourth major in a row, hitting a double gold. And that, I think that put me #1 in the gi, in Nogi in my division, and Nogi overall in the world for my age group.
And talk about a
And
little bit about that age group. Like, I mean, you were in the heyday of MMA and stuff. There were black belts competing that you may now have thought about fighting in MMA that you may now want
I
run
know.
into some of this stuff. Throw some names around.
Um, um, Actually, because because I was competing against other brown belts. Actually, I have a great story for my first brown belt or my first black belt at IBJJF. Um, so if I can get to that, so going into my second year, I was a brown belt for 2 years. My second year, I think I dropped a match against an ultra heavy. He did this really funky footlock, and I was upset because I was turning the match around and I was winning. And he was just big. He did this big, ugly push off,
Mhm.
and put me in the air because he was an ultra heavy. He's a big guy, just kind of moving me around. He just grabbed my foot and went like this, and I went, ah. And of course, that's a verbal submission.
Oh,
So the match was automatically over. I turned immediately, looked at James. I was like, oh no, this is not gonna go. I'm done with this right now.
yeah.
So I trained up really hard all summer. I didn't compete and go back until the Chicago in the fall, and it just so happened that I didn't have anybody in my weight division for the first time ever. And guess who I got in the first round of the Open? I got the
Okay.
ultra heavy.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so and I was ramped up. I was ready to eat nails, man. And for a match against an ultra heavyweight, man, I all respect, dude, man, but I really put it on him, and I finished him with a choke. Uh, it was a
Well,
very emotional win because not only did I get a win back, I got a submission win back.
yeah.
Um, and then I had two. I think I hit a quad gold, um, that that tournament because I won. Well, I got my participation trophy for making weight at division because I didn't have anybody. Then I won the Open, had another match in the Open against actually a guy that I knew. And then I won 2 matches against a really scrappy Compredo guy. Man, we had 2 super high-paced matches, and they were so much fun. Uh, and immediately went back to no-gi pans. This was so I hit the trip of a lifetime and late. This would have been late 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So we had Masters Worlds. The very next week was no-gi pans, and then wrap up the year with no-gi worlds. So I had it arranged at work with vacation time and swapping time frames with some other guys. I had 13 days off of work. So we flew to Vegas. I competed Saturday at it would have been Masters Worlds. I won my division and got my world championship in the gi. The very next week, we went to. I'm going to backtrack this. Man, we did a bucket list drive. So we drove from Vegas to LA, which is something I always wanted to experience because I heard about it. It was, how beautiful it is, and nobody's stories ever did it justice. So it was very cool to do. When we were down there, we actually got to go to Sean Patrick Flannery's place and train at his academy, Hollywood BJJ.
That's good stuff.
And yeah, Sean had previously came in and taught a class at James's because he was in town for a Comic-Con. And one of the coolest guys that I've met, he hung around afterwards for like an hour and a half, just telling stories and stuff like that. So it was cool to bump into him again and be out at his place, and got to not only meet, but actually train with a guy who's a jiu-jitsu hero and legend to me, man, Dan Camarillo. It was very surreal. It was really surreal for me to be. I was like, man, he's on the mat with me. This is crazy right now. And I actually got to do a couple rounds with him. It was a lot of fun. A lot of lessons learned in those 2 rounds.
He's an old school guy though, for sure.
Man, yeah, for sure. He's an arm hunter for a reason. We drive back to Vegas so we can catch a flight out to the East Coast. This is like the very next Saturday, so we can so I can compete at no-gi pans. This would have been no-gi pans number 4. Number 4. I win my division and had 2 really tough matches against a super heavyweight, and won my 3rd double gold at no-gi pans. By this time, I was the number 1 guy in my division in the world in gi, and I was still holding my presence no-gi at my weight and overall in the world at brown belt in my age division.
You had that's simply an amazing run, though. You know what I mean? It's like,
man, yeah, brown belt, man. I was fortunate at everything. I was doing absolutely everything right, and it was such an awesome time. I think about it a lot. And then of course went back to no-gi worlds. I win my division, and of course I'm thinking about this, during the tournament, and I was like, man, I could really tap this off with a double gold. And I got to the finals. The guy, he was a super heavy. Actually, him and I are still stay in contact. We have each other's social media and still follow each other. He's a great guy. Brian Edwards, I think he's out of South Carolina.
gotcha.
He did this. It was so he pulls, I pass guard, and all of a sudden, my head and my arm are getting squished from top side, and I can't breathe. And I start panicking. I can't get out of panic tap. And I pop up and I look at Aaron Johnson and Nikki Sullivan. And I was like, what the hell? And they were like, oh, well, we don't know. We didn't see it coming either. Funny moment. But it was like, it was what it was. It was a modified buggy choke before the buggy choke was a cool thing. And to tell you the truth, man, there was so much pressure that I had put on myself in between my semifinals match and finals match with Brian. It was actually a very big relief. I care about the loss, but at the same time, I'm so good with the loss, because it made me sharper and made me realize that that no matter how many times you slug at it, man, there's always going to be somebody that's going to catch you slipping. So just back to training. I got my black belt shortly after that, in November of 2015, and then moved to Tennessee and trained at the Tennessee Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy under Ray Casillas for
that's awesome.
for a long time, for some years. So first black belt match, IBJJF. We had an Indiana guy who had moved to Chicago, Evan Manweiler. Okay. Evan trained at Pedro and Daniel Viana's academy in Chicago.
Okay.
My opponent was Daniel. Both of them born and raised in Brazil. All I was told was, hey, he's got a really good guard. I was like, okay, so I'm in the bullpen and I'm waiting. It's at the Chicago Open. And Evan's like, hey, would you like to meet him before you guys go out? You know me, I'm all about some respect. So I walk over. And as I walk around, I see him. And immediately I see 4 stripes on his black belt. And I didn't say anything, but in my head, I am absolutely losing my mind. So I'm respectful. Hey, it's good. I heard a lot about you. Heard some good things, man. I'm excited to compete with you. So I walk away, and immediately I'm looking for James. And you're gonna have to pardon the language coming up in this, but it fits with the story.
Go ahead, no, shoot. It's all good.
So I find James, and he's up in the stands. So I'm like, come down here. He's like, what? And I was like, calm down here. So he comes down. He's like, what's wrong? And I was like, that dude's got like 30 fucking stripes on his black belt. And he starts laughing. He goes, he's a black belt. You're a black belt. Go fight him. And it ended up dropping the match 0-2. He got a sweep. Actually, we've competed against each other 3 times now, and it was 2-0 him, and advantage him, and a referee's decision him. So, eking closer and closer and closer. But, black belt's been a lot of fun. I never understood the statement. The guys, I see guys that, they're celebrating, whatever year it is at black belt, and they say that, and it's been, say, like, this month it's been 8 years for me at black belt, and hear them say, I've learned more in the last 8 years than I did all my previous years training. And that is a huge fact. I was 2 or 3 months into my black belt, and I started thinking, I was like, man, what do I do now? And it's just, it's just, because it makes you reevaluate everything and what you're doing and how you're doing it. And am I doing this right? And if it is one thing that I've learned is that, if there's 20 guys on the mats, I never thought about it before, but I had to learn that that's 20 different arm bars. The concept and the technique is the same across the board, but there's going to be details that each and every one of them have to have for for it to be effective for them, because not everybody has the same biomechanics and physiology that make them unique to themselves. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So that's the fun part of coaching for me. Um, man,
Do you
being
still coach MMA as well, or is it just that you're just in jiu-jitsu right
uh,
now?
um for a while I did. I was okay with it, but man, during how it was, man. Oh, I want to fight. Okay, when is the fight? It's in a month. Get away from me. Um, you, you know, uh, it takes somebody who I know has been in, like when I was down here, it was some years ago. Um, Emilio Hernandez wanted to fight, um, and he didn't take an MMA fight until he got his black belt. Um, but that was somebody that I was okay with, even if he would have been at purple belt. He was already very dedicated to the sport. Um, and he was an avid competitor. I think he competes more now. Um,
Right.
that is somebody I was grateful to be able to try to help out with.
Mhm.
I'm in my 50s, and I'm trying to do rounds with a 25-year-old and doing the bulk of the rounds. And man, I'm telling you, the old dog gets tired easy. Uh,
For sure. But no, I see what you mean. A lot of people feel that way. Like if if you're not going to do it for the money, that is teach, to whoever walks in the door, then it's got to
yes,
be something that moves you like a passion.
yeah. One thing in particular, out of everything, six six world championships, five in no gi, one in the gi, and seven no gi pants titles. All of that takes a complete and distant second to the satisfaction of creating a connection with students and being able to give back and being a coach.
Okay. So you appreciate the coaching part of it. And
Yeah,
so
I
you're
love
teaching jujitsu.
um not at the moment. I have to I got to clean up some stuff down here, but I'm ready to get back. I had a bad bout with vertigo this last week, and still some effects going on. Um, most of it has gone away, but I'm ready to hit the mat again. I've been off for a couple of weeks since I was actually in Indianapolis, moved there in March, and I've been back in Tennessee for about a month. Um, so I gotta clean some things up and find some place to train for a little while until uh,
You know what you need is you need
we
a
figure out
place.
what else.
Yeah, you
I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna say, what you need is you need a place with a big trophy room to put, because I don't think you sold your trophies and stuff. You got now all these jujitsu trophies on
No,
top.
I have both trophies from the danger zone, medals from the tournament that Klingerman used to put on, and I still have all of my IBJJF medals.
And that's what
Uh,
you need, a place to display that and teach, man. You love to teach. Um, you've got, anybody who looked at your MMA career, if they had a gamble, they probably would say, let him dedicate himself to jujitsu. He'll do okay. He'll be fine, but you did a superior step up there, because you were competing at the highest level and you kept it going consistently for a long time. And that's a pretty, it's a accomplishment that very few people can say they did. And that's amazing. That really is. So yeah, I think you need a home, need to settle down and teach, man.
yeah, Tennessee is my home, man. I absolutely love it here. We came down here. James brought me down here for the tournament that he used to run years ago, and I helped him out through the day as a worker. And I fell in love with Tennessee instantly. I said, anytime you ever go back, you let me know because I'm in.
Yeah.
And then I just so happened to meet somebody in the process. That's another story. Uh, but uh, I love it down here, man. Tennessee Jiu-Jitsu is strong. They have, I mean, from Nashville all the way down to here in I'm actually south of Columbia, little 40,000 population of Columbia has, I want to say, three jiu-jitsu academies.
Wow.
So yeah, I know. So it's jiu-jitsu is rich in Tennessee, man. You know, it's in the middle of the country. Nobody would think so, and you got really good academies up in Franklin, and you know, it's funny because there are some guys that I had competed against um earlier at purple belt, and actually my very first black belt match um was against uh Javier and Javier Arroyo.
Okay.
And man, him and I ended up being, man, that's my bro, man. You know, he showed up one day and we just, you know, we did a few rounds, and the more we trained together, finally I looked at him, I was like, and we had three matches. And finally I told him, I was like, look, man, no more matches. I was like, I'd rather have you as a training partner. I was like, we had our matches and it was fun and it was what it was. Uh, I'd rather have you as a training partner, as a friend, man. And he agreed, and we take our turns, you know, whoever has their day, and
Yeah.
it's a good time, man. It's quality training. Um,
Sure.
I will
You need
say,
somebody. You can't always teach if you're also going to be improving, and that's the thing about black belt that you hear,
ooh,
from the
uh,
masters. You know what I mean?
yeah, especially we talk about the open mat on Sundays. I'm currently not training there right now, but I know the culture of that. The Sunday open mat at Tennessee Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy is it's savagery, man. It is. If you want a session in, man, you show up. There's no, you know, on the Sundays, man, there's no politics, there's no bullshit. Come in, they're hard rounds. That's when the coaches get to train. And man, it's tooth and nail, and we get at it. We really get at each other. We laugh, we carry on. We do it's hard rounds. But it's quality training, man. You can come in one week and have a great day, and that next week, man, and come in and just get bopped. You know, and that's just, you
Yeah.
know, that's just how it is, and that's, you know, that's that continual learning process. You know, and I fully believe that quote: if you're continually the best person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that's wise words to end on. We've been going for 2 days, kind of thing. Uh, if I'll let you close up if there's any story or anything that you feel like you wanted to talk about that we missed. I'll let you close with that. If not, we could just say goodbye. This will probably be up on the podcast a couple of days, so you'll be able to listen to it again and send it to your friends.
um, uh, Shout out to really first, man, to, you know, the people that I've gotten to train with over the years. You know, starting off with James and being on his tutelage, you know, from white belt all the way to black belt has been awesome. James is one of my best friends in the world. Daryl Smith, Nick Hyde, uh, you know, and then, you know, when I hit my brown belt run, man, I don't mention it a lot. I was training in Lafayette at the Impact Zone. Um, Good training, you know. We just I left there when I moved to Tennessee, and all the success and everything that I got to have, and everything I learned, not just about life, but about jujitsu and stuff like that. A different kind of different style of coaching, from everybody at the Tennessee Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Um, I have a lot of love for a lot of people that don't know it. Um, my sponsors, I've had a sponsor for years, Strychnine Kanan out of Indianapolis. He does some super cool stuff. He takes care of me in rash guards and gis. Um, there's ever anything in finger tape. He has a side thing from Strychnine called Death Grip Finger Tape. Great product. And Norse Fitness out of North Carolina. And those guys have been taking care of me. I supported him. Knee sleeves, lifting gear, stuff like that. I was just a big supporter of him and got to meet him before I made the transition to be over on their team. And just being able to work for you, man. Uh, and showing and just showing up when you guys needed somebody. I'm however that role fell, man. I'm glad to have had that. I hear people all to say, my hands hurt all the time. I'm talking about myself. My hands hurt all the time. I have aches and pains, and that's just part of being 52 now. And even the plane ride back after the Raddick fight, I would not trade any scar, broken bone, concussion, or anything for the life of me that I've had. It's been 22 years this month that I've been involved, and I've got to travel the country, to do, to fight people and to grapple people and make lifelong friends, man. Because I could fly out to California for the next tournament, and I would see people that I've known for years out there. I wouldn't even that. And that was another thing. When I was doing most of this at Brown Belt, most of the time when I got on the airplane, I was doing that shit by myself. I didn't take a coach with me. I was like, I'll find somebody to coach me when I get out there. I'm not worried about it. And I always found somebody, and those are the people that I call my jiu-jitsu family. Those guys that look out for each other, man. Even though we try to, even though we may hit the mat and try to choke the hell out of each other, man, off the mat, it's always a huge respect thing, man. And I love that.
Yeah, no, it's a lifestyle for a reason, because it does have all that other stuff that, you can always find a way to take it to the next level. You know what I mean? And that camaraderie is important. And that camaraderie comes up actually in the early days of MMA as well, showing up in, small venues and stuff like that. So for sure, it's definitely important that be mentioned for the history of it. It's an amazing thing.
I had a guy that I used to run around with when I was living in Indiana when I was younger, early 20s. I was a troublemaker. He lives out in Phoenix, Arizona, still. And some years ago, it might have been like 2000, late 13, 2014. He's like, hey, man, I got this dude. He's into jiu-jitsu. I think you two really hit it off. So we friend requests, conversations randomly back and forth. Dude's super cool. When I went to my first Masters Worlds and I got third, I had hurt my knee in the open. So the next day I'm at the airport. Our airport gets delayed. My plane gets delayed. It was so far behind when we landed at Phoenix. The flight that I was supposed to catch was already long gone. So they gave us a hotel and everything. So the first thing I do, I'm getting a hold of Gabe. So I dial his number. I just shoot him a message on Facebook, and I'm like, hey man, what are you doing? And I was like, text me. And the first message that came up was, are you in town? So I took a picture of it and sent it to him. I said, I'm here in this room. Dude, like 35, 40 minutes later, there's a knock on my hotel room door. I open it up. He is on crutches, Miguel. He still has like a walking boot on one of his legs, and he's got a bag like from the store. He comes in and said, "Oh, hey man, it's good to meet you in person." Da, 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 da. He had a small little clothing line called Destroyer Fightwear. He brought me a brown belt and a couple of shirts and stuff like that. And we sat and we hung out till like 3 o'clock in the morning. And
cool. Yeah,
I was a brown belt then. I want to say he was a blue or purple. And now we're both black belts, and we're still friends to this day. Matter of fact, I just talked to him just a little bit ago.
that's awesome, man. That's just awesome.
Yeah, it just randomly stuck in Phoenix for the night. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm going to get a hold of my guy that, just seemed to be super cool and end up being super cool. We're still friends to this day. So to me, that's the real magic of MMA, and the real magic of jiu-jitsu is the little stuff like that you're able to experience and make those kind of memories.
That's awesome, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.